There wasn't a single moment where America woke up poor. No sirens, no announcement, no stock market bell signaling the end. It happened slowly, then suddenly, the way civilizations always fall. Not in a cinematic crash, but in 1,000 quiet failures. Grocery bills doubling, rents tripling, bridges crumbling, paychecks shrinking, credit cards maxing out, and families living one broken transmission away from financial ruin. By 2026, the truth is unavoidable. America is no longer a rich country pretending to have problems. It's a poor country pretending to be rich. The signs were all there. The debt, the inflation, the housing meltdown, the shrinking middle class, the collapse of savings, the explosion of poverty in places no one ever expected to see it. A nation where millions can't afford a dentist, rent a home, or buy groceries without financing them. This isn't just a recession. It's not a downturn. It's not economic cooling. It's the beginning of Great Depression 3.0, the moment the world's richest empire realized it had been hollowed out from the inside. 1. The death of the middle class. When working America became poor, the middle class didn't die in a single year. It didn't collapse under one law, one administration, one crisis. It died the way a forest dies. First quietly, then all at once, until one day you look around and realize the trees are gone and the silence is permanent. By 2026, the American middle class, the backbone of the 20th century, the engine that built suburbs, highways, malls, universities, and the modern dream, is no longer a class at all. It's a memory, a marketing slogan, a nostalgia trigger for politicians who still talk about it like it exists. America didn't just lose the middle class, it became a country where working full-time is no longer enough to not be poor. Start with the numbers, the ones no economist wants to put on a podium. For the first time in modern history, the majority of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency. Savings rates collapsed. Credit card debt exploded past $1 trillion. Auto loan delinquencies hit record highs. Renters spend 40%, 50%, sometimes 60% of their income just to keep a roof overhead. This isn't a cost of living crisis, it's a cost of existing crisis. And wages, flat, stagnant, motionless. The paycheck may have changed, but its value is smaller than ever. Groceries doubled, utilities soared, healthcare became unaffordable even with insurance. Childcare costs more than college. College costs more than a house. And houses, they're not financial assets anymore. They're luxury goods for the top 10%. The middle class was designed around a simple equation. One income plus one house payment plus one car plus a small savings cushion. Stability. That equation is gone, replaced by a new formula. Two incomes plus two side hustles plus debt plus more debt, barely staying afloat. The middle class didn't lose ground, it lost gravity. Families float between bills, hoping nothing catastrophic happens, and when something does, medical emergency, lost job, rent hike, car repair, they fall straight through the cracks. So what killed it? 1,000 things, all connected. Inflation that eats paychecks faster than paychecks grow. Housing prices that lock out the next generation. Stagnant wages that never caught up to productivity. Corporations replacing full-time workers with contractors. Healthcare that drains every raise you ever earned. Childcare that costs more than most families' rent. Education that traps millions in lifelong debt. And an economy where upward mobility, once a ladder, is now a rope full of splinters. Middle-class families used to build wealth by accident. Today, poverty happens by default. People aren't buying homes. They're renting forever. They're not upgrading cars. They're fixing the same one every year because a new payment would collapse the budget. They're not taking vacations. They're taking second jobs. They're not saving for retirement. They're hoping Social Security doesn't collapse before they do. And the emotional cost is catastrophic. Parents hide the stress. Kids hear it anyway. Couples fight about money because the math doesn't work anymore. Communities hollow out. Dreams shrink. Mental health craters. People don't feel like they're living in a country headed toward prosperity. They feel like they're living in a country headed toward the pawn shop. The United States used to measure success by opportunity. Now it measures survival by how long you can keep the bills paid before the next crisis hits. This is the moment America became a poor country. Not because it ran out of money, but because it ran out of middle class. 2. The housing implosion when homes became prisons, not assets. There was a time when owning a home symbolized stability, the great American reward for doing everything right. Work hard, save a little, buy a modest house, build wealth, raise a family, retire comfortably. That was the formula. That was the promise. That was the system. But by 2026, that system has ruptured. The American home, once a stepping stone to prosperity, has morphed into a financial trap. A burden, a monthly avalanche of taxes, insurance, repairs, and debt that most families can no longer climb out from under. This isn't a housing slowdown. It's not a cooling or a soft landing. What's happening is far darker. The housing market has turned against the very people who built it. The collapse didn't start with prices. It started with everything around prices. Insurance doubled, then tripled. Homeowners in Florida, Texas, California, and Louisiana watched premiums leap from $2,500 to $7,000 to $11,000, sometimes in a single year. Property taxes soared nationwide, rising faster than home values, faster than inflation, faster than wages. A $350,000 home in 2018 with a $4,800 annual tax bill now carries one for $9,200. In some states, the taxes alone cost more than a mortgage used to. And maintenance? The cost of a roof jumped from $9,000 to $18,000. HVAC replacement went from $4,000 to $12,000. Even minor repairs feel like luxury purchases. Owning a home has become a subscription service with no cancellation option. But the real implosion hits when you look at the buyers, because they're not buying. The math doesn't work anymore. Even if prices come down, the taxes don't. The insurance doesn't. The fees don't. The interest rates don't. Nothing resets. A cheaper home with a $10,000 annual tax bill is still unaffordable. A cheaper home with a $6,000 insurance bill is still unaffordable. So people stop trying. First-time homebuyers disappear. Millennials resign themselves to renting forever. Gen Z barely even considers ownership, and the investors step in. Corporate landlords buying entire neighborhoods, turning what used to be starter homes into permanent rentals. Thousands of families who would have owned houses in the 1990s are now tenants indefinitely. It's not the American dream. It's the American lease agreement. And then comes the final twist, the one no one saw coming. Millions of current homeowners are stuck. They can't sell because the new tax and insurance numbers scare buyers away. They can't move because their new mortgage would cost 3 times what they pay now. They can't refinance because rates won't go down. They can't downsize because smaller homes cost just as much. They are trapped in houses that are no longer assets. They are cages with vinyl siding, prisons with granite countertops, financial commitments with no escape hatch. This is why inventory is rising, but demand isn't. This is why price cuts are accelerating, but buyers aren't returning. This is why people who used to see housing as a ladder now see it as a cliff edge. A home used to be wealth. Now it's the anchor dragging middle-class families underwater. By 2026, the collapse isn't just financial, it's psychological. People aren't dreaming of owning a home anymore. They're dreaming of escaping one, and the crisis only grows darker when you follow the money upstream to the one institution that could fix it, but instead made it worse. 3. The government debt spiral. When Washington ran out of other people's money. Every empire falls the same way. First it borrows, then it pretends, then it panics, then it collapses. By 2026, the United States enters the phase no one in Washington dares name out loud. The moment when the country officially runs out of other people's money. Not literally, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the far more terrifying way nations go broke. Slowly, mathematically, and inevitably. For decades, America lived on credit, cheap credit, unlimited credit, a global invitation to borrow without consequence. Politicians didn't ask, can we afford this? They asked, how much can we borrow before voters notice? Turns out the answer was all of it. The national debt didn't grow. It metastasized from 10 trillion to 20 trillion to 30 trillion to numbers that no longer sound like money but like astronomical measurements. And for years, everyone shrugged. Interest rates were low. Inflation was tame. The dollar was king. Other nations kept lending. But in 2026, the bill finally comes due. Interest rates spike. Inflation sticks like a stain. Global trust fractures. The US government owes so much money that paying the interest alone becomes one of the largest expenses in the entire federal budget. Bigger than education, bigger than infrastructure, bigger than housing. America didn't default on its debt, it defaulted on its future. Every dollar spent on interest is a dollar not spent on roads, bridges, schools, veterans, healthcare, seniors, housing, or anything that makes a nation functional. And this is how countries slide from wealthy to impoverished without a single shot fired. And what does Washington do? Exactly what collapsing empires always do. Stay, borrow more. When the economy slows, they borrow. When the market shakes, they borrow. When they run out of money to fund basic programs, they borrow. When interest payments rise, they borrow more to pay the interest. It's a spiral, a financial whirlpool pulling the entire economy downward. And while the debt climbs, citizens feel the consequences long before economists admit them. Higher taxes, higher fees, higher inflation, less government support, worse services, delayed payments, broken systems. You don't need to be an analyst to understand the truth. You see it every day. Potholes bigger than car engines, schools falling apart, hospitals understaffed, cities going bankrupt, retirement programs teetering, the FAA running on software older than its pilots. A wealthy country doesn't operate this way. A wealthy country doesn't patch bridges with tar and faith. A wealthy country doesn't run out of funding for firefighters. A wealthy country doesn't let trains crash because the upgrade budget got cut. But a poor country does. A broke country does. A debt-racked empire in decline does. And the worst part isn't the debt itself, it's who owns it. Foreign governments, mega banks, sovereign wealth funds, entities that don't just lend money, they expect leverage. America didn't just borrow cash, it borrowed control. It borrowed sovereignty. It borrowed the ability to shape its own future. When interest payments devour the budget, a nation cannot build. When a nation cannot build, it cannot grow. When it cannot grow, it cannot survive. This is how Great Depression 3.0 begins. Not with stock market chaos or breadlines, but with a government that spent a century borrowing from tomorrow, and finally reached the day when tomorrow couldn't pay. 4. The death of American wealth. When the illusion finally cracked. There's a moment in every collapsing empire when the people realize the wealth was never real. That the prosperity they believed in was borrowed, leveraged, inflated, or simply imagined. By 2026, America reaches that moment. Quietly, abruptly, irreversibly, the illusion breaks, and what's left is a poor country wearing the costume of a rich one. For decades, America hid its decline behind shiny metrics. Stock market up, GDP up, corporate profits up, luxury malls filled, tech companies booming. But beneath the surface, the foundation was rotting, entire cities collapsing, infrastructure decaying, savings evaporating, medical debt exploding, retail desert spreading, and an economy where the majority of people could no longer afford the basic ingredients of a stable life. America didn't run out of wealth in 2026. It ran out of the illusion that the wealth was shared. Walk through the country today and you see the truth everywhere. The truth money can't hide anymore. Start in the cities. Downtowns once filled with office workers now sit half empty, their skyscrapers lit like tombstones. Ground floor retail is gone, replaced by locked doors, security gates, and for lease signs that have been fading in the sun for years. Transit systems are crumbling, crime rises in waves as public services collapse. And the tax base, the lifeblood of any city, is bleeding out. Then go to the suburbs. Streets lined with homes that look prosperous from the outside. But inside, families live paycheck to paycheck, drowning in mortgages, insurance premiums, and grocery bills. The SUVs in the driveway are financed. The vacations are financed. The appliances are financed. The groceries are financed. America didn't lose the middle class. It replaced it with debt. Drive farther into the rural stretches. The poverty is quieter but more terrifying. Hospitals shuttered, pharmacies gone, grocery stores replaced by Dollar Generals running on skeleton crews, factories long dead, schools underfunded, understaffed, and falling apart. Entire counties living in what economists politely call economic stagnation, but locals call what it is survival mode. A wealthy nation does not look like this. A wealthy nation does not function like this. A wealthy nation does not have 40 million people on food assistance, 20 million behind on utilities, and millions more one paycheck away from homelessness. But America does. And then the final illusion shatters. The belief that future generations will be wealthier than the ones before them. For the first time in modern history, the path upward is gone. Young people aren't buying homes. They aren't building savings. They aren't having children. They aren't climbing the ladder because the ladder has been sawed in half. What they inherit instead is a mountain of national debt, a collapsing housing market, a broken healthcare system, a decaying public infrastructure, a climate of economic anxiety so deep it feels permanent. This is the moment America officially becomes a poor country. Not because the richest lost their yachts or the stock market crashed, but because the majority of the population can no longer afford stability. Wealth is not a coastline of mansions. It is not a handful of billionaires. It is not a tech sector pumping out paper fortunes. Wealth is safety. Wealth is stability. Wealth is a population secure enough to dream. And America in 2026 is a nation where dreaming has become a luxury item. The illusion has cracked. The reality is here. This is Great Depression 3.0. A slow motion collapse dressed in modern branding. A wealthy facade masking widespread poverty. A nation finding out the hard way that prosperity without foundation eventually turns to dust.